Oh, hello, everybody! It's your favorite show that goes live on Mondays. It's hey, did you see this one? As always,
cohorts in crime and punishment. Gotta invite Bubba Blackfly and
Acclaim.
A killin'.
He's a killin'. The Achilles heel to my Joe Argonaut. Nope, it's Jacob and the Arcs. Joe. My brain's broken. I had a long day.
Chick.
Oh, there we go. All there is left to ask is, hey,
I forgot to.
Did you see? Oh.
One second.
Wait. Oh, wait.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
No.
you're pretty... Okay, it's the 1940s or the 1950s now.
I think it's the 50s.
It's the 1950s in Kalen's
It's 1959 is the year the movie takes place.
And that movie is, hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you see this one?
In the Summer of Summer Movies series, Stand By Me. We did it. We watched Stand By Me. And here's the thing about Stand By Me I didn't remember. It's a very quick watch. It's just under an hour and a half, and it's a very easy watch. And a lot of the tropes from the movie have been repeated across many other movies and television shows. So it was an interesting watch. How did you guys do with it?
I have 2 pages of notes.
Nice. I'm not sure if this one counted. Actually, so I just want to... Last episode, I was trying out this character. It was this drunk and obnoxious character, and this episode, I'm not trying that character.
Well, how about I try that character this time?
Nice.
I'm gonna try a new character I've been working on every week, every time that we've done this show, and it's have a single beer while we're recording.
Oh, that sounds like a good idea.
That sounds like a.
So I'm not sure if this one counts for the title said, but if it does count, it's set at the very end of the movie at the hour and 24 mark.
He does say it? Oh, you mean
no,
because they play the song?
Can we count that or no? I'm not sure if we can.
Well,
I think we can.
If you want to get technical about it, the song plays throughout the movie many times, incorporated into the OST original score.
That's true, but they don't.
The melody.
It's just the melody.
The instrumental.
That's true. They don't say the words. Fine. Never mind then.
1 hour, 24 minutes in.
So this is the first official week that Steve is a part of the show officially. We sort of made it official when we did the Sandlot 2 weeks ago, but we were still deciding whether or not he would be an official member. So everybody, please welcome the newest member of the
Make some
podcast.
Some celebration emojis or whatever they are.
Yeah, put some emojis. Let's put some emojis in the chat
for me.
Put your emojis together. Put your hand clapping emojis together. Okay, we got 4 people watching.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys continuously inviting me back until I eventually just became part of it. It's great.
Yeah, it only took 3 episodes, I guess. Hey, somebody liked. Whoa, I've never gotten a like before. That's pretty cool.
And Richard Dreyfuss is back.
Richard Dreyfuss is back. He's a staple in our summer movie series.
He's a summer man. He's a summery guy.
He's a great narrator. I fucking love his voice.
Yeah,
it's true.
One of my first notes is Richard Dreyfuss is a better narrator than the guy from The Sandlot.
He could have. He should have been.
He should narrate everything.
I saw a lot of parallels between these two movies. It almost felt like The Sandlot. This is like an R-rated, not really a family movie. And The Sandlot, the director and writers went out to be like, why don't we make a G-rated Stand By Me for children?
Yeah. What is this rated?
I want to say PG. Before there was PG-13, I think it's
PG-13 because
no, but I think it was before there was PG-13. Oh, maybe it's rated R.
I think it might be rated R because they're swearing and stuff.
There's a child corpse at the end, so.
There's a child's corpse, and they say the F slur a lot of times.
There's
they do.
Yeah.
I wrote down in here, did people call each other homos in the 50s? I didn't know that was a thing to jab each other with back then.
Yeah.
I thought that was more of a 1980s thing.
I mean, the movie was probably written...
tattoos?
Yeah, it came out in 1986, so it's
probably written very near 1986.
They're nobody's gonna understand this 50s slang.
Based on a novella by Stephen King. It's a Stephen King story that's not horror, but has horror elements.
Horrifying.
Yes. And there's a scene in it that I completely forgot existed, but may have made me not like vomiting in movies. But they get the puke fest where Gord is Gord's good at okay, so we got the cast. Gord, played by Wil Wheaton, is kind of we're seeing things from his point of view, I felt like. But he's like the smart one in the group, you know?
Yeah, I wrote down all four of their names and what their sort of tropey thing is.
They're archetypes?
They're archetypes, but they're also sort of archetypes from childhood, not so much in classic literature or film. They're sort of encapsulate a friend group pretty well. Even if you had more or fewer people within your friend group, they really kind of spread it out over these four characters very well. Which is Gordie is the introverted smart person.
Right.
Chris is the leader of the group, but he also has a goddamn heart of gold. Vern is the lovable goofball, but he's also sort of a sweetie pie. And then Teddy is the unhinged daredevil.
And those kids are played by River Phoenix plays Chris Chambers, the leader of the group. River Phoenix, of course, famously died in front of the Viper Club of an overdose. Wil Wheaton from Star Trek fame plays Gordie. Corey Feldman is Teddy, and he's very Corey Feldman in this movie. And the outlier here, a lot of people forget that Jerry O'Connell from Sliders made his movie debut here.
Yes, this is the first movie he ever made.
Yeah.
He was doing acting before, but yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to refer to them as Wesley Crusher, Indiana Jones, Sliders, and Tommy Jarvis.
And who's River Phoenix? Tommy Jarvis?
No, River Phoenix is Indiana Jones. He was in the third Indiana Jones. He played young Indiana Jones at the very beginning of the movie.
Oh, yes, I remember. He also played overdose victim #1 in real life.
God, in real life.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, too soon.
Too soon. It happened in 1993. But yeah, it is kind of shitty because rewatching this movie, I haven't watched too many things with River Phoenix in it, but I do have a note here that is 3 of the 4 kids have an intimate crying moment in the movie where they break down emotionally. And then Jerry O'Connell has the moment where he's running from the train and is meant to be crying. And to be fair, he does look scared. But,
that's because of Rob Reiner got pissed off at them.
Yeah, I heard he yelled at them or something to make them be terrified.
They were fucking up the shot
behind. So sorry, you guys froze for a second. And I was like, "Is my internet dying already?" I did write down that if you were to rate them, 1 being the best, we'll go through first to last. And the first, obviously, is River Phoenix's scene where he breaks down about the milk money. And then the second is maybe Wil Wheaton when he is at the end where he's kind of sad that his dad doesn't love him. And then the final one is when Tommy Jarvis, our friend Teddy, is just like putting his hand in his face and pretending to cry. And I'm like, this kid isn't crying for real.
No, Corey Feldman.
What, after the junkyard scene?
Oh, we got some legs.
Sorry, I had to
maybe.
Corey Feldman is kind of a ham.
turn my fuck.
Data.
You guys get any of
that? Just that last part right now.
I was rating my children crying from 1 to 3.
We got all the children crying up till you started talking about Corey Feldman.
Oh, Corey Feldman.
Are you talking about the scene after the junkyard for Corey Feldman?
Yeah, like I liked all of the stuff in that scene when he's like freaking out at the fence because he did feel like he was getting legitimately angry. But when it came to his emotional moment where they're all sort of like carrying him afterwards, I was like, okay, that's like the one part in the entire movie where it kind of took me out because I was like, I don't.
How did you rate Wil Wheaton's fainting scene when he had a leech on his penis?
I wrote down, Gordie fainting is very good, and I underlined very good because his fainting was hilarious. Like I laughed out loud.
I vaguely remembered that scene. See, my relationship with this movie is that over the years, I've seen it, but I've never seen it beginning to end. And I didn't even really learn what their adventure was until much later in life. I never saw the part where I managed to see bits and pieces of this movie and never saw a single scene of them being like, we're going to find a dead body. It was always like, oh, it's just these kids on an adventure. They're going on an adventure together.
Yeah,
and they're going to have
anytime you hear like a Simpsons or a Family Guy saying, you guys want to see a dead body? They're literally referencing this movie.
Yeah, but it's always like it's like the old homeless guy is referencing it, and
it's probably Corey Feldman's character playing a homeless man.
Yeah,
he's returned.
He's returned. No, Corey Feldman's career has been interesting lately because he has him trying to blow the whistle on horrible Harvey Weinstein types, but having no credibility. But he has no credibility because he's a fucking insane person who has like a bevy of stripper models who play instruments for his weird like Michael Jackson like pseudo cover band. So he's not the person to do it. I feel horrible for him. I feel horrible for his existence in Hollywood. He had a very rough go. The two Coreys, River Phoenix. Well, yeah, of course. But I'm just saying, like, his behind-the-scenes life in Hollywood is horrifying. But the unfortunate thing is you do all these drugs for all these years and turn into an insane person, you have no credibility left. So whether or not you're telling the truth or not, nobody's going to listen if you're a raving lunatic. And that's just sort of the way things have gone for this man.
Is he friends with Macaulay Culkin?
I'm sure he was at one point. Macaulay Culkin has seemed to come out on the other side of things. He's got an internet network of podcasts. He shows up on like movie review shows on the internet nowadays.
He's on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah, he's done Joe Rogan. He's notably been on the Red Letter Media shows a few times, and they're pretty good. They're pretty good movie review.
Culkin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got a new phone and it keeps like going to dark screen. I'm gonna see if I can go into the settings real quick and stop it from doing that. Like I can't.
Yeah, if you just go to the settings and just change the thing to like 30 minutes or an hour. I had to do that for my phone as well.
None. No sleep whatsoever.
No sleep for the telephone wicked. I assume we're getting a loading screen just because he's in the settings menu. So,
I concur with your thoughts.
Right. So, just to go back to what I was saying before we got into the archetypes, that scene is they hunker down for the night, and River Phoenix is like, "Hey, Gordie, why don't you tell us a little story since you're so good at telling stories?" And he tells a story about lard ass or whatever. Oh, we lost him.
You might need to invite him again.
We'll invite him back here in a second.
Lard ass, yeah. Man, I
but
can't believe. Well, I mean, obviously it's a story, but like the whole town,
they all call him that.
even the Shriner brothers or whatever they call it, the Shriners or whatever, they're boom ba da boom ba.
The BOA, and they're called BOA in this. I didn't really know what it stood for, but
I don't know.
Yeah,
did you know what that stands for?
No, I didn't. Whoops. Hope I invited the right person. I didn't really catch, but they were supposed to be Shriners, right? Like they had those hats on.
Yeah.
The cone hat, fez. Yeah.
I think so.
Did you have anything to? Did you have any problems with throwing up in movies as a kid? Because I really did.
I think I figured it out.
You got it. So for throwing up, I was never very much of a squeamish person. Especially like definitely not with movies and not too much in real life. You know, I'd see some growth like that's gross, but like that was about the end of it. One thing I will say though, even the audience was puking blueberries. But yeah. Although I guess it was a festival, so maybe they were all eating pies beforehand.
The setup for this was really weird to me because the kid drinks a ball of castor oil and a fucking raw egg, and the puke was the first puke was so obviously like he turned sideways and the puke is coming from like here, and you can see like the disconnect between his mouth and the puke. But then they show people in the crowd like just like regurgitating a little bit, and I thought it was a really weird.
Well, the reason I can give it a pass is because it's a kid telling a story to a bunch of other kids around a fireplace. It's not supposed to.
Exactly.
You don't need to suspend your disbelief or like hold yourself into some sort of standard of reality.
It kind of goes into what you said last time about the Sandlot and all their tall tales.
Right. Yeah. I also wrote down. Wow, way more barf than the Sandlot.
Yeah. Except for that one part where they show the sidewalk and the barf is just like too much barf.
And they're just caked when they're getting off the ride and they're all fucked. I also wrote down in the pie story, the kid's name is Davy. And they call him Lardass. Everybody keeps calling him Lardass. And it's so funny. And I'm like, but his name is Davy. They should have called him Gravy. Better name. Better name.
Much better name.
But then I said, but to be fair, barfarama is a good word that I don't hear very often anymore.
It's very 80s, 90s. Like, Pauly Shore would probably be like, barfarama, dude.
Yes.
I heard somebody, as a sort of an aside, I heard somebody refer to Jake and Logan Paul as the modern day Pauly Shore. In that they're so a part of like modern pop culture to a fault that like they sort
People
of fit
hate
that
them for it.
Yeah, they sort of fit into that same area, and that was just an aside thought that I had. Also, this movie does the thing where they introduce a gun in the first act, so of course you have to use it in the third act.
Right.
That's a thing.
Yeah, I have a list here of things in this movie because I watched this movie maybe too young. This movie came out, I think, a year before I was born. So my dad, I guess, watched it when he probably saw it in theaters or something, and he was like, "Oh, this will be a great movie to show my kid."
Right.
And I was a literal child when I watched it, and so many things in this movie, I haven't seen it in a while, but I realized as I was watching it that so many things in this movie are directly linked to like fears that I had as a kid.
I think that's accurate for me too, especially the puking scene. Most 80s and 90s kids teen movies had puking in them, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And also the dead body might have fucked with me a little bit too. But like I said, I didn't even register that I knew what the plot was till much later in life. So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I mean, the first thing that I was like, oh no, kids aren't supposed to do that, is when it's in the treehouse and they're all hacking darts as 12-year-olds, and I was like, oh my god, smoking is bad. These kids are smoking. They're bad boys.
Apparently it was cabbage leaves because Reiner is against cigarettes, which is weird that he put it in the movie at all.
True.
Yeah, the kids be smoking in the 1950s.
Yeah, and there's that really good, funny scene later on where they're all like acting like they're adults when they're smoking after they have their meal or
Their
whatever.
dinner.
Yeah, the best time
to smoke right after a meal.
It's time to have a smoke right after a
Best
meal.
smoke.
Mm-hmm.
I like
they say
how,
right after supper, which is an old-timey
supper?
word that no one uses
Yeah.
anymore.
supper, dinner. Oh, man, I actually looked it up the other day, the difference between supper and dinner. I can go find the specifics, but one of them is later than the other.
So is supper at like...
Do you mean that you use it later in life? Like you have to be over the age of 65 to use the word supper?
I'm pretty sure I use supper. But I think dinner. So dinner.
Supper was an East Coast thing for us. Kaylin, when we were growing up, our parents used supper for sure.
Yeah,
it's biblical. I think the East Coast is very backwards.
Dinner goes until 7. Supper goes until 10.
But we also called lunch dinner in Nova Scotia.
I've heard people.
Or some people did.
I don't get that one. I can't excuse that one. Supper and dinner,
old people.
But supper and lunch, no.
It's the elders.
Dinner, lunch.
So next thing to freak me out was the gun. As soon as he pulls that gun out, you're like, oh my fucking god.
It's a 45.
Yeah, and then the other kid says, yeah, I know. And I'm like, these kids know about guns?
How does Gord know?
Because he's cool,
I know,
obviously.
He's such a dweeb, though.
Yeah, he's a gun nerd. as well as a whole bunch of other types of nerd. And then to top that off, the gun is loaded, making the gun even scarier than it was before. We knew it
because he's like, it's not loaded, and then fucking unloads around.
They all yell, Jesus! Which is also very funny.
And then the diner lady comes out with the
quit
lighting those firecrackers
out here. And then they go around the corner and immediately are met by the most terrifying character of all time, Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland's character from The Lost Boys, for some reason.
Yeah, he's playing a slightly less scary character known as Ace than his real-life persona, Kiefer Sutherland, who is more scary.
And tormented the kids on set, outside of filming as well.
Yeah, I heard that he used to, like, bully them. Which is, like, I mean, kind of maybe good method acting, but also maybe he was just a bully. He was just actually a bully. He's like, no,
but like, is it more? Is it
the movie more realistic?
Is it better to make the movie more realistic like that, or is it just being a dick, like Jared Leto on Suicide Squad, or Jim Carrey on Man on the Moon, where it's just like you don't. This isn't that kind of movie, guy. You don't need to take it to that level.
Also, they're only in 2 scenes together. It's not like they're at the beginning and the end.
Maybe that's why he needed to do it, so that the fear would be there, because they didn't have enough scenes to build it.
Right. I think also, like, one thing about this movie is the only family that you actually see is Gord's family, and you get a really kind of deep understanding about how he feels about his own family with those flashbacks between him and his. Or I think there's only
his
one
brother,
dream sequence, but he has 2 flashbacks with his brother being like a hero in his life,
played by a young John Cusack, which was crazy to see.
Yeah,
and I think he died
for some reason. He died in a Jeep accident.
Explanation?
Yeah, but I thought he died at war. Like I thought he was in.
No, that's Teddy's dad. And he went crazy from war, not dying in it.
Also, but I have a theory about that. I think he just went crazy and talks about war, and his kid wants to hold on to that. I don't think he was actually in any wars. That's the impression I got, based on the way that the junkyard guy was talking to him. Right. He was kind of like, okay, that's just the vibe I got. It's never explicitly said. But the vibe I got from the way that the junkyard owner was talking to Corey Feldman was that his dad was just always a crazy person, and just
I think where I was going to with that was that you don't see any of the other kids' home lives, which could be, a product of the fact that, timing, obviously, for the movie, you can't fit all that kind of stuff in. But I think it also kind of strengthens the movie overall to only see Gord's family as he is the narrator of the story. And there aren't a lot of moments in the movie that break away from the four boys to show anything else, unless it's speculation on his part, or that moment where Vern is telling the story about how he's looking for his pennies, and then he overheard the story and he tells them, kind of thing. The only moment that
I gotta say, that scene though, that scene of him under the porch or whatever with all the holes everywhere, loved it.
Yeah, that's a great scene. That's one that I remember.
Yeah, I think that also kind of strengthens the fact that Vern is sort of the lovable goofball. He's like a sweetie pie in my brain, because he's just like, he's the most innocent out of them all, where he's like, I want to be a pirate, so I'm going to put all my pennies in a jar and then make a treasure map to find my pennies, and then I lost my treasure map.
Then I lost the treasure map.
Vern.
But he's very much, he is very much like, oh, shucks, oh, geez, guys, oh, shucks, guys.
Oh, my God. But he also has, like, the cutest moment in the movie where he brings the comb, and he's like, I thought if we're going to be on the news, then, we want to look nice.
Yeah.
And then later on, they're like,
oh, I lost the comb.
Food? And he's like, no, like slightly later, he's like, no, I didn't bring any food. And they're like, why didn't you bring any food? And he's like, I brought the comb. And the guy's like, what are you even bringing a comb for? You don't have any hair. And then he's like, I brought it for you guys. Like, oh, my God, this kid has... And
then when the train's coming later, when they're running from the train, he, of course, loses the comb, which is the perfect three-act structure. The perfect three-act structure for that comb.
Yeah. I mean, it was a short-lived story, but the comb tale was one of the best in this movie, for sure. But, I mean, speaking of that scene, I remember when I was a kid, I don't know about you guys, but we would have, like, police officers and stuff come to our schools and do assemblies where a bunch of kids would come in and the cops would talk to us. They usually talk to you about guns and drugs and stuff, but for some reason they always would talk about how dangerous train tracks are. All the time. And I don't know if it's like a product of this movie coming out like just before I was born, and they were still in like an era where they're like, we lost another fucking 17 kids this year to train track injuries. But it worked. And this movie
they must have.
Even more scared. Because
they must have
maybe get close to a train track, but there's no way
you guys
in hell
ever
I'm
traveled
going
down some train tracks?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, I have. In my life, but I would never go across a bridge because of this scene in the movie where Gordie is like checking the vibrations in the.
Was he checking? Is that what he was checking for? Like vibration? I thought it might have been like heat or something.
No, he was.
No,
see if it was vibrating because a train is going to come, and
you can see his hand. You can see his hand shake a little bit, and then he looks over, and then you see the smoke come from above the trees.
Gotcha.
And then they have about 6 seconds to get out of the way, and it's funny because it was just an engine and one car, and that the scene, the imagery of the wide shot of this like engine and one car, and the kids getting out of the way, I thought was like really good. I don't know what it stuck out about it for me, but I really enjoyed that.
Also, when they go to who is it? Chris and Teddy go to check on Vern and Gord. They're in they jump off to the side, right? But then when they go to see where they are, it's such a rocky like little side patch. Like
they would have gone way more fucked up. Yeah.
I remember being like, are they gonna hit water? Because it's been so long since I've seen it, and then they were just like all dusty and like down like a little bit of like an escarpment, and you're like, all right, whatever, I don't mind too bad. And then the next scene is Kiefer Sullivan playing chicken with like a lumber truck. And you're like, oh, now I must write down that Ace is a psychopath.
Ace is a complete psychopath.
Yeah.
Like, he's out of control, over the top. He almost, if the gun wasn't, fired by Gordie in that scene near the end, he looked like he was going to cut River Phoenix's neck. Oh, yeah. He went up to his ear, and he was going to fucking gut him like a fish. Yeah. Which is extremely intense. What happened to these slightly older teens that made them all sadistic killers?
I
guess
I
they're
was sensitized as a kid. Like this, none of like watching the movie now. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably not a kids movie, but like I definitely watched it and didn't really think that much of it.
I was freaked
That's
out
true.
by almost all of it. I used to work at a summer camp for a long time, and there were leeches in the river that we would go through. Like, we would do like these river hikes, and every time we would
Have you
go
guys
in
ever
there,
experienced leeches?
yes, every time we would go in there, I would have a baggie, like a sandwich bag, just filled with salt.
Yeah.
And we would get out, and there would always inevitably be at least one leech, and you just have to sprinkle it on there, and it shrivels up and falls off. But I even remember, like, when I first started working there, they're like, yeah, you got to take your kids on river walks. And I was like, you're not getting me in that river. There's leeches in there.
I was irrationally afraid. Yeah, I was irrationally afraid of leeches too, and I think it might be another one of those latent things in my brain from seeing this movie too young, forgetting about it, and then later in life seeing bits and pieces and being like, I feel like I was irrationally afraid of this movie as a teenager because of weird little things that I blocked out of my head.
There's a lot of scary imagery in this movie, and like, it's weird because, you know, watching it now today, that scary imagery is still there. Like when Wil Wheaton pulls the leech out and his hand is covered in blood, it's like very contrasty to, like, because you don't see any blood really in the movie up until that point.
No,
and you know, I was a little boy one time, and if I found a leech on my dick, I would probably faint as well, or if not, just like immediately start screaming or crying,
or develop a new fetish.
But like, you know, the train scene was really scary to me as a kid. The gun was really scary. The smoking was spooky to me. The scrapyard dog was kind of scary, but I mean, there's also like these weird sort of like every scene in this movie is framed so nicely, and I put in parentheses here that the forest stuff really feels
when they show a long shot down the train track, that gave me chills.
Yeah, it's almost like
that
you're
gave me
like a fantasy movie for a second, you know, where they've got the beams through the trees and everything is very soft in the background, and it's so thick and lush, and the train tracks going through it all. It's
where I grew up, I would go to like the super rural area up in Middleton, Nova Scotia, which is like up by the Bay of Fundy. It's all forest. It's all, you know, a lot of scenes like Stand By Me. And the reason why looking down that train track really struck a note with me today is because I, like, looking down a country road has sort of the same vibe, you know? Yeah. And I really was sitting here watching this movie just having flashbacks the whole time, just remembering goofing off in the woods with my friends in the same context. I never had a leech on my dick. But
I mean, me neither, but I was always scared that it would happen one day.
Absolutely.
I've never experienced leeches once.
Have you seen them before, though?
No, not in real life. Well, I think this movie is the only time I've seen them, experienced them, and definitely made me scared of them, for sure.
Well, you know Chocolate Lake? Lake? There's leeches in Chocolate Lake.
I think I've been there maybe a handful of times. I did not. If I knew there were leeches there, I would not go. I haven't been there.
I just know that you swam in the Kearney Lake as well, yes.
What if I stay on top of the water?
Well, you have to be around the fringes. If you're, you know, where there's like the tall grass that comes out of the water, that's where leeches live. Okay. They were in like swamp when they, you know, Castle Rock is in Portland, I believe, which is like, you know,
it's also in every Stephen King work ever.
Well, there's a show called Castle Rock.
Castle Rock is a made-up name.
Castle Rock is supposed to be the same town that has Shawshank Prison in it.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think that the body, the short story that this movie is based on, is also in like a collection of, I think it's 4 short stories, and it's called like the Seasons or something. It's something about the 4 seasons, and each one I think is supposed to take place in a different season.
This is summer.
This is obviously summer. Yeah. The other 2 that I know of that are in that book are Shawshank Redemption and Apt Pupil, which both have movies made off of them.
You guys see Apt Pupil?
I haven't
No.
seen it in a very long time, and I've only seen bits and pieces of it, I guess, similar to the...
it's a weird one.
Yeah, it's got Ian McKellen, and he's like a Nazi or something, right?
Yeah. And doesn't it have, like, Tobey Maguire or somebody?
No, it has that other guy. He was in The Cure. He was also in Tom and Huck. I can't remember his name right now. I'll think.
Oh, not Jonathan Taylor Thomas, but...
No,
Zachary Taylor Thomas.
The Zachary Taylor Thomas is the older brother.
His name is not Zachary Taylor Thomas.
Zachary Ty Bryan and Jonathan Taylor Thomas. And the other one who becomes Goth.
Yeah, anyway, so those... It's weird because, I assume at some point that fourth one will get made into a movie. I think that's like the winter ep.
Nice. Also, in the novella or whatever... so you were talking about how it focused more so on Gordie, and that was a decision that Rob Reiner made, like when he developed it into the movie, because it wasn't originally, the story wasn't originally from his point of view like that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I haven't read the book. I just thought it was interesting that potentially there's like a whole year's worth of tales that take place over this one sort of...
It seems like there's a lot of Stephen King novellas, too, because I know that they recently made In the Tall Grass and another one called, like, 1912 or 1914.
Yeah,
and those are both novellas.
What's the car one? The one with the car that kills people.
Christine?
Christine,
no,
Christine.
No, Hot Wire? No, Raw Power?
Christine. It's called Christine.
What's the one with Emilio Estevez with the cars that come to life?
You're thinking of Hot Shots with Charlie Sheen.
No, Emilio Estevez with High Wire.
Anyway.
Raw Power.
Yeah, Christine is also a short story. Tons of his short stories have been turned into movies. Not very many of his like long epic novels have been turned into movies because they're too hard to adapt. Whereas if you take a short story, you can easily stretch it rather than have to condense things. But I did write down here that this kid, they all complain at the end about the end of the story not being great. And that's something that people complain about Stephen King about all the goddamn time, is that he doesn't know how to end his books properly. They're always great up until the end, and he just doesn't know how to make an ending.
Maximum Overdrive.
Maximum Overdrive.
That's a Stephen King movie where all the cars come to life.
What? Is it actually Stephen King, or is it just a movie with Emilio Estevez, the Money Dutchman?
No, Stephen King's masterpiece of terror, directed by the master himself. Maximum Overdrive, starring Emilio Estevez and Trucks.
Okay, yeah, well, I was thinking about Christine, the movie where the guy, his car comes to life and kills people. That's what I was thinking of.
I want to know what this movie is that you're talking about.
Did you say Stephen King also directed it?
Yeah.
I didn't know he ever directed anything. Oh, also,
so either Stephen King wants to become a car, or he wants to fuck a car, or he just wants to run somebody over in his car.
Right in the gas.
Yeah. Okay, so Christine is just about a car coming to life, but Maximum Overdrive is about all the cars coming to life. So
that's way scarier than one car.
I wonder if they're related, because we might just be missing the fact that Christine the book was turned into Maximum Overdrive the movie.
No, Christine is a movie as well.
But Christine is also a movie. Okay, sorry.
Okay. But, you know the Cobra Gang or whatever? You know the blonde guy? Did you notice how his hair is, like, long on the side and back, but it's short and, like, it's like a flat top on top?
Yes.
Like, how is that a hairstyle? What does that look like when it doesn't have... But, like, what does that look like when it doesn't have product in it? Like, it's like, I don't even know. Dumb. I don't know.
It probably looks like you should be in the loony bin with Teddy's dad.
Hey, here's a little fact for you about the movie Maximum Overdrive. Yeardley Smith is in it, who is, of course, the voice of Lisa Simpson.
Ooh.
That is interesting. Speaking of Cobra Gang... I wrote down, also, there's a lot of scars in this movie. A lot of people
Scars?
have weird fake scars. Yes.
The ear scar on Corey Feldman.
The ear
There was a
scar
lot of
is the
scars?
first one you notice, obviously.
Yeah.
The next one is one of the other guy who comes out of the store with Kiefer Sutherland has like a weird eye scar, which is also
I think
clearly
it's
not
Chris's
real.
brother. Yeah.
Right, and then so maybe he got fucked up by his dad as well, right?
Maybe.
It wasn't clear to me that guy was his brother until later in the movie when he pulls his belt off and he's like, "I'm gonna whip your butt" or something, you butt wipe. Or he calls him a butt wipe, I think, which is funny. The dad of Gordie has a lip scar, which I think is a real scar. Which is
I think that one's
that
real.
actor has a scar. There was another. Oh, and then they're also scarring each other
with the tattoo.
Yeah. And so I wrote down, what does it mean? Because I don't know. There's just a lot of them.
I know. Well, I wonder if in Fallout 3, you know how the gang are a bunch of greasers and they're called tunnel
snakes. Rule.
Tunnel snakes.
We're the tunnel snakes. That's us.
Hey, we're the tunnel snakes.
Rule. Yeah.
Maybe that was a reference to this, possibly.
Could be, yeah. I'm going to save that till the end because I think it's a nice place to.
So anyway, the movie we're talking about this week is Maximum Overdrive. Just kidding.
It's where all the cars come to life.
I liked it when he called him a goocher and then explained what a goocher is. And then I wrote down, as they're all talking in their weird, small kid 50s dialect, I wrote, I have no idea what these kids are talking about.
Yeah.
And this was the scene where they're sitting around in a circle.
At the fire?
In the junkyard. No, in the junkyard. And they're talking about Mickey Mouse Club. And they're talking about Annette Funicello. It's boobs.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that reference either.
Yeah, it's Annette Funicello from those old beach movies. She was on the Mickey Mouse Club in the 1940s. Or the mid-1950s.
We talked about River Phoenix's death. Oh, there's a scene in the movie where River Phoenix says, this guy's not going to make it past 20 about Teddy. And I thought it saddened me because this kid did such an amazing job in this movie that he barely made it past 20 in real life. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
Man.
And Teddy ends up living in the town forever when he's kind of going over.
They say he's like doing odd jobs and just being a weirdo in town, yeah.
But Chris Chambers got stabbed in the neck and he fucking died.
Yeah.
In his teens.
That's like the very first thing you see at the beginning of the movie.
I wrote down that Chris Chambers is the dad. He's the dad of these kids. And like many times, so I wrote down he's the leader, but he's the leader with a heart of gold. He's not like the leader in the same way that Ace is the leader to his friends.
And treats them all like shit. Treats them all as subordinates.
And I think that Chris sees Ace treating these guys like this. And he's like, I can't become that guy. And I don't want to be the guy who is bossing my friends around so that they want to hang out with me because they're scared of me. I want something better, but I don't think that I can get it, which is kind of like a direct sort of one of many things that he talks about throughout the movie that is the reason that he is willing to die to not let these guys take this corpse basically at the end of the movie. It's like he sees it all as it's like the Milk Money story, which is an amazing scene, the most believable child acting I think I've seen, and maybe one of the best child acting scenes I've ever seen in any.
Yeah, because River Phoenix was a fucking child prodigy, gone way too soon.
He killed it, man. That he cries for real in that scene, and you know that he's either able to just turn that on, or he has some sort of thing that he's able to access that a lot of people aren't able to.
Rob Reiner told him to think about a time that what did he say? A time that an adult figure or whatever. He didn't didn't get into too much specifics, but think about a time where an adult figure let you down or something like that.
Right.
So there was some real.
I mean,
I watched the commentary.
It's a pretty hefty story as well. It's a story that you could see happening and it's believable, and his reaction is believable. Or he went to somebody that he trusted to essentially atone for his actions, thinking that he was doing the right thing, and then it just ended up biting him in the ass. And not in such a big way that he's like, this has ruined my whole life, because he's like, no, my life was already ruined. All it did was make me realize that I am not going to be able to shake this persona ever, because these people have already decided who I am, and I'm stuck like this. And like, he says through tears, like, I just wish I could move somewhere where nobody knew who I was. And that's like super heartbreaking. But he also knows that he has no way into college because he's not smart enough. And he also knows that he has criminal expectation put upon him based on his older brother, based on his dad, based on his family.
Which is crazy to be that insightful as like a 12-year-old or whatever they are, like that's some real forward thinking. And I think Gord has a tinge of that too, where he's good at, constructing stories, he's good at school, but he's the smart one of the two, and they're best buds. I might venture to say there was a little bit more working there, a little bit of like they loved each other a little bit. Maybe not as... This afternoon when I was watching, I was like, are they going to kiss? They're going to kiss, aren't they?
Brotherly
but,
love.
I
that's what I want. That's where I wanted to go. That's where I want to go with it more realistically. I don't want to sit here and be like they were going to smooch each other's faces. It's more like they legitimately loved each other as brothers. Gord didn't have a brother.
You had fat one, biggest and fattest.
He's like, you did. Remember?
Remember when we were comparing dick sizes? Hey.
No, you know what? I understand the energy, but that's one of the things that I kind of like about the dynamic of at least the two of them, but also the others as well. Like they weren't shying away from being like intimate with each other in a very like compassionate way, but without it being weird, like when Teddy is like breaking down from that junkyard man, like making fun of his dad, like they're all literally hugging him and like comforting him. And
he threatens to tear off his head and shit down his neck.
Yes, and I was like, oh, another classic line from this movie that
that he was later in Duke Nukem 3D.
Child. Swearing is also bad.
I'm gonna tear off your head and shit down your neck.
I mean, when that happens, they're all comforting him, and then when Chris breaks down, that's like the most intimate moment in the movie, and Gordie is slightly less comfortable comforting him in that moment than Chris is comforting him at the end of the movie when he's breaking down about his dad not loving him. Chris like literally like grabs him around his whole body and like hugs him as tight as he can. And you're like, this is the same way that his brother, when he gives him the hat, is like hugging him, and I think he's like seeing Chris as like a
surrogate,
a force to fill, like a surrogate to fill that role that John Cusack was meant to be. And he might not be as wise, but he is like wiser than Gordie is being throughout the entire movie, where he talks about maybe just taking the shop classes instead of the preparatory courses for college. And he's like,
I think that's what happens when you go through bullshit, though. It kind of makes you grow up like sooner.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely does. Growing up, I had a lot of bullshit in my life, and I was forced to grow up faster than I, maybe should have. And I didn't appreciate being a child. And I was one of those kids that, like, I turned 16 and I was like, let's party. I turned 12 and I was like, I should be able to stay out as late as I want, Mom. My mom's like, you're fucking 12. Like, you're, So I can, this movie really resonates with me as an adult. And
I was going to ask you guys, because I have a literal question for the both of you.
Nice.
This movie, for me, it's not a nostalgic movie. It's not something I watched a lot when I was a kid, but I do feel like it is encapsulating a sense of timelessness, because it is presenting you with the idea of childhood in what we would arguably say is a simpler time, where they don't all have technology. They don't even have like like telephones to call each other to plan things. They have to like plan out what they're going to do over the course of 2 days without pulling out like a map and being like, it's going to take us this long to get here. They just know because they've done it before, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember having those kind of feelings when I was a kid, like riding around on my bike and stuff, which was one thing. I was like, these kids don't have bikes, but I guess whatever. Maybe bikes weren't invented yet.
I think they're all like poor kids.
I think they're all supposed to be poor, yeah.
I
think you're right.
Yeah, because I think there was a line. I think someone said something about the people with the view or whatever. Like there's like a group of people
that's
that
during
had,
the. It's the scene when he's crying about the milk money to Gordie, and he says, "Do you think if one of the kids from the View stole the milk money, if she would do that to them?"
Yeah,
and they both say, "No fucking way, man." And it's because they're probably rich kids, right? Like you would assume the View means they live on a hill and they literally look down at people who are like in shittier homes and stuff.
It was a great like metaphor.
And also, no explanation needed. You hear that, you think if the kids from the View did that, like you're just like, oh yeah, I kind of understand what that means without them having to go into like a lot of depth. Which I also think is kind of the beauty of this movie overall, which is like the bond of these four kids is almost immediate. Like it's almost just that treehouse scene at the very beginning of the movie that lets you understand the dynamic of their relationships between each other with a little bit of sprinkling of Richard Dreyfuss's narration and just the way that they're talking to each other and like playing off of each other. Yeah. And rather than it being like 45 minutes of exposition to try and explain to you who these kids are, you already know it after that scene is over, and the rest of the movie is just kind of expanding on it or exploring it through their misadventures as they're going down this railroad track, which is amazing because generally you need a whole first act to be able to understand these kids, but it's like, no, his dad tried to burn his ear and he's a wild man and he tries to like play chicken with a train within the first 20 minutes of the movie.
That's what I noticed about this movie. I was surprised. Well, if somebody asked me and I didn't know, how long do you think Stand By Me is? I would say easily 2 hours. Easily.
Yeah.
It has such a big, you know, it has such a big spot in my like movie memory. But I turned it on and it's like an hour and 27 minutes.
Yeah.
And they get to the Home Alone of it, as I call it. They get to the point, you know, they get to that train track within 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're, you know.
That's what I like about old movies.
I mean, 80s movies are all typically 90 minutes.
Yeah, and
but
I think that they probably went out to make this movie thinking that it was probably not going to be rated R, and then they were kind of like steadfast on keeping the things that they had in it because to sacrifice any of those heavy moments, like imagine they were like, you can do the leech part, but you can't do the blood. Like it wouldn't be as impactful as it is if there was no blood in that part. Like
it would be a lot more comedic if he passed out because
everybody would start laughing in the theater, but the blood is what makes it be like you're giggling because he makes a funny face and falls over, but like understandably, he just pulled out of his underwear a bloody insect. And like the same goes for all of the scenes where they're cursing. They don't overly curse in this show or in this movie, but they do curse enough that seems realistic. Like I think about myself at 12 and I didn't curse as much as I do now as an adult, but when I did, it was always impactful. I was cursing for a reason, and that's what kind of it feels like in this movie.
Do you guys remember when you first cursed?
I got into cursing. Like I suddenly was like, oh, cursing is dope. Let's all swear a bunch. But the biggest memory I have of swearing around my parents specifically is my mom. Me and my mom were driving, and I had heard cunt, and I was like, Mom, what does cunt mean? And she slammed on the brake.
That's a big curse, Jason.
Did you hear it on the radio?
Like
I don't know. One of my friends
before cunt. Like, what
no, I did, but one of my friends said it. Anyway, she slams on the brakes and pulls over, and she like screamed, cried, never say that word at me.
Oh my god!
So I learned
like,
the impact of
home.
Yeah.
Like, but Mom, it's 15 miles.
It literally was. I learned real fast not to say that word. But I do remember my aunt, or like before that, being like, "I heard you and your friends back at your little tree fort just cursing away." So
you had a tree fort?
It was on the ground. It was a tree fort, but like not up in a tree. Just like we built walls around. Yeah.
Like the base, yeah.
Okay, we've gone over good acting.
I always wanted a tree fort. What was the question you were going to ask us? Did you ask?
Yeah, you never asked the question.
Yeah. So what my question is, do you feel that this movie will remain timeless, or do you think that the Zoomies and whatever comes after the Zoomers is going to have a disconnect from the idea of not always having technology? Because we come from a time where we didn't have technology, so we can remember.
Right.
Being
I don't think Gen Z knows the camaraderie that these kids know. I do. I remember going into the woods with 3 of my friends, going on a weird adventure.
Not having a cell phone and just being there for as long as you wanted to until you had to go home.
But I think that the generation below us, the next gen, I think that they would watch this movie and have no connection to any of it.
You're like, why don't you just pull out your phone? And be like, because phones were attached to walls and you couldn't take them where you wanted to go.
Well, you technically could in the 80s, but you had to be extremely rich and on Wall Street.
Yeah, I guess. But I mean, it's such an odd thing to think about because, the internet was a thing that was invented when we were, or not invented when we were in our,
it was commercialized
at the age of this. But there was a point where the internet was like, you couldn't use your landline because your internet was hooked up, and if somebody called, you'd be like, "No, I was trying to download a song from Napster." Anyway, unimportant. I just wanted you to give me the answer as to people in their 30s, people in their 40s, people in their 50s could watch this, and they will be able to consider it timeless. But do you think that there is going to become a time where it's no longer timeless? Because when I think of timeless, I think of something like Star Wars, where it's like, Star Wars isn't real. Nothing in Star Wars is ever going to be real. And like, you can put that in any era and any age group, and people will be like, cool! Laser guns, laser swords, space fighting, and like, maybe when we invent space fighting, that's when it will no longer be timeless. But
I mean, there's lasers that can melt stuff.
Yeah, but you're not going to see 2 people fighting on a volcano being like, no, like that's not going to happen anytime soon.
I mean, the politics in the prequels are, pretty political.
Pretty timeless.
Well, have you guys ever watched like old movies before your time and like had like a disconnect to them?
I had a bit of a disconnect when we watched Rebel Without a Cause. Just because everybody was so like psychologically different.
Yeah, you know what though? I felt a lot more disconnected from those types of movies when I was in my teen years, and then once I got into my 20s, I started to like, I can put my mindset into these people, and I can forget about the technology for a minute, and still enjoy what's going on in the story. So, maybe it all just depends on like the maturity of people looking at something artistically over a certain amount of time. We can't rely on the teens, but like, will those teens turn into people who are a little bit more sophisticated and be able to like watch something like this for what it is, rather than being like,
well, as long as we introduce them to it, that's what we're here for.
I think my point is though, like, Stand By Me makes sense to my brain because it's the 1950s through the lens of the 1980s. But when I was watching Rebel Without a Cause, that movie takes place in the 1950s and was filmed in the 1950s. So culturally, things are so different that I couldn't wrap my head around that.
I think that what's interesting about this movie, though, is that the character who's telling the story is supposed to be in the 1980s. Like, Richard Dreyfuss is writing the story.
He's typing a story on an old Apple
shitty computer. Yeah, where the screen is black and the letters are green.
One-sentence paragraphs.
The font was like fucking giant.
Nobody in the story tells you that his dad is actually a shitty writer. Like he's not a good writer. He's just a writer. He's the
And
master
then
of
we
the,
sang the song
master of
"Stand
the
by
short-form
Me."
sentence. Yeah. Dun 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 dun. Okay, so I think you guys answered that question for me. Thank you. Yeah, I feel similarly, but I think that like I'm able to kind of like put myself into that mindset of a kid going down the railroad tracks with my buddies more so than somebody who's growing up right now will ever be able to. But I don't know, maybe there's kids right now roaming down railroad tracks and we just don't know about it.
It's possible that there are parents who are, in their 40s. They have kids that are teens that are like live in rural areas and they're trying to hold on to those things and they're like, leave your cell phones inside and go out in the fucking woods. That I could see that still happening.
It is possible, but I also feel like there's so much terror around like everything nowadays that maybe
that's true.
Everyone's like, you can go out, just take your phone and call me.
But also when they come home, they just go onto the internet.
Yeah.
Even if they spent all day, off of the line.
Off the grid.
Yeah.
I gotta say, the soundtrack to this movie was dope. Yeah. One of the nice, I'm not sure, like, I'm sure there's a word for it, like, kind of like a transition maybe or whatever. Like when we first see Gordie and he's going to the treehouse and then Rock and Robin's playing. You hop in the treetops all the day long.
Yeah, there's some good musical choices. They're all very. That's another thing. In terms of nostalgia, I have here that the music in this movie is weirdly nostalgic for somebody who was born 20 to 30 years after those
right?
songs were hits. Yeah.
Like,
and I think it's
because
this
made "Stand by Me" a #1 hit again. Like "Stand by Me" was like a hit when it first came out, and then when this came out, it became a hit again. Like that's amazing.
Yeah. That is amazing. And I believe that they were approaching Michael Jackson to do a remake of the song, and then they decided to not do it because he asked for too much money. And also,
I heard something about
they're
that.
like, you know what, the original song is fine. And it makes more sense because the movie takes place when it was released.
I will say, it is now 5 after 10. We've been talking about this for an hour, which means we got to wrap things up here, friends.
Yo, wrap that shit up, B.
Oh God.
Before we wrap it up, though, I just wanted to point out that the budget for this movie was $8 million, and the return on investment was $52 million. So, for a novella turned into a movie, this movie did extremely well, and I think that's another reason why it sticks in everybody's head as like a classic movie. So, let's go around and give our final thoughts. Steve, if you want to start us off.
Okay. So I think I'll start off by saying that all of the characters in this movie, the main characters, the main 4 kids, they did a very good job, but more importantly, they become very sympathetic in a big way very early on, which invests you as a viewer into each and every one of them for a different reason. And the nicknames that I gave them at the beginning, that wasn't just in jest. Like I mean all of those when I say that, and those are the reasons that I think that they're all important to the story. And if you were to remove any of them, it probably wouldn't work as well. You need that sort of weird precarious balance. Yeah. Even Teddy, who doesn't seem to be very integral to the development of the other characters, he needs to be there to sort of form this chaos.
Yeah.
And one thing that I was thinking about during the movie was that you don't see any of the other characters' families. And I know I went into this a little bit, but I didn't go into why I think that is. And I think it's because the other characters... the story takes place over the course of 2 days, right? Like, from beginning to end, it's like they get up, they go out, and then they get to, their sleeping point, and then they get to the end where they find the body. Oh, I also wrote, Ryan Reynolds plays a good dead kid. because that
That
guy
was
kind
Is
Ryan
that
Reynolds?
Ryan Reynolds?
No, it's not.
Oh.
But it kind of looks like him a little bit. I looked it up.
Yeah.
I would have believed it.
So the story takes place over the course of 2 days, but it's all through the hearsay and sort of like a broken telephone style storytelling of Gordie's experience as it's kind of unfolding. And it's like this guy writing the story over the 2 days. But I think that it strengthens the ideas of the home life issues for each kid in the same way that like a horror movie does if you don't show the monster. Just hearing these small tidbits of each person's home life, it heightens not the fear, but sort of like the reality, and you're trying to see these kids through this like broken world that they live inside of through Gordie's eyes and not just through the eyes of like doing a flashback. So like if you were to see Teddy's ear being burnt on the stove, rather than just seeing the burn, like you can see the burn there in the first scene that he's shot in, and you're like, holy fuck, what happened to his ear? And then they say like his dad put his ear to the stove. And then you later learn the effects that the war may or may not have had. Your theory was interesting, Jason, but if it was the war, it's not even being told to you early on. Like he says his dad put his ear to the stove and burned it, almost burned it off. But you don't find out more about his dad until like the childish taunts of this scrapyard man. It leaves this mystery of this like monster dad, but rather than him being like, yeah, my dad is a piece of shit, he tried to burn my ear off, he's like, no, don't you dare talk about my dad about like that. And he's basically torn up trying to defend this person that burned his ear off. We know that Chris is going to die right out of the gate. You see the title, and then Gordie goes into like, the first time I saw a dead body was when I was 12 years old, and that goes into the kids. But you learn within the first few seconds that he's going to die, which I think is more digestible to see through all the care that he has for his friends. Like he literally cares for them so much. It's like heartbreaking that you know he's going to die, and you almost forget that he dies by the end of the story. You're like, man, this kid he's so strong. And then that heartache kind of comes all the way back, and you feel the same sort of heartache that he feels, where he feels like he's never going to be able to succeed in life, and then he did succeed in life, and then he died tragically being stabbed in the neck by some asshole at a fucking restaurant. And to see all of his home life would have been depressing in the story. It probably would have been powerful and scary to watch, but it might have overpowered all of those little moments where he's being a dad as a 12-year-old to his friends. And I think the best thing that happens in the movie, in my opinion, is when Gordie turns to Richie Chris, when they're on the train tracks, and he says, "Am I weird?" And this is a question I think all the time about every friend that I've ever had, being like, am I weird? Like, am I fucking weird? And he says, yeah. And he's like, no, I'm being serious. Am I weird? And he's like, yeah, you are weird, but so is everybody. Everybody's weird. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so true. Everybody is weird. As weird as I am, so are you, so are you. And it's fine. And then the very last thing that is spoken in the movie is Gordie's dad, or Gordie's son, opens the door, and I guess they're trying to go to the beach or something. He's like, can we go? And he's like, yeah, I'll be out in half an hour. And he's like, you said that half an hour ago. And then he's like, yeah, sorry, my dad is really weird. He just gets like that when he's writing.
When he's writing.
Like, whoa. He is weird. Everyone's weird. And like, nobody's perfect. Everybody has like crazy shit going on in their lives. And this movie is like, to me, timeless in a way, because like that's kind of sort of the idea behind it all. Is like, everybody probably has one story that they could tell that is just as crazy as this, if not crazier, maybe a little bit less crazy. But everybody has at least one story like this inside of them. And I think that's the point of Stand By Me.
All right, Caleb.
Sorry, that was a little long.
That was well put. I hate to follow it up. I'll say this much: the movie was well executed. There wasn't really any like dull moments, any drawl, like anything dragging along. Like everything was kind of, every few minutes something was happening. I could, and I'm sure other people feel this way too, but there's like little bits of each of them that I could see in myself, which I think is, helps, people relate to it. Damn, your speech was great.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it just came off my tongue. I didn't really think about it too hard. Just let the words flow, Chris. Don't worry, we're all a little bit weird.
What are you, a lit major?
I mean,
overall
lit as in, like,
yeah.
I smoked a lot of weed.
All right, well, it's hard to follow up two people, but honestly, I had a good time watching it today. It's one of those movies that I really needed to sit through all the way, start to finish. I never did, and I've only seen it bits and pieces, and it sort of connected a lot of dots for me as well. And what Steve says to his point about everybody being a little weird, I really, that's a really eloquent way to put it. And the other part is I like seeing camaraderie, and where Sandlot failed it did show the camaraderie, but it was much more cartoony. This showed it in a much more visceral, realistic way, how friends actually are with one another. And I really enjoyed that, and I really appreciated that. But I did end the movie and say to myself, I don't think I can rate this movie that high. I think I'm going to give it a 3.2, and that's not fair. That's not fair at all, because through talking about it and learning more about you guys through the lens of this movie, and maybe learning a little bit about myself and really reflecting on it, it actually bumps this movie up to an easy 4.2. Really just it took talking. Me and Kaylin have had this happen to us before, where we talked for a second before the movie, and we're like, oh god. And by the time we've talked about it, we've jumped the movie a full point grade almost. And that's what happened with me through this talk, because this is the first podcast we've had where we didn't even diverge. I mean, I started talking about Maximum Overdrive a little bit. Maybe that was inappropriate. Maybe that wasted some of our time. But
there's a little bit of a swerve on the highway, if you know what I mean.
Heyo, Emilio. But yeah, so with that, this was an excellent episode, and thank you both as always. I just want to ask you one final time today. Hey, did you see this one?
Oh, hey, did you see this one?
Hey, did you guys see this one?
Sincerely. Hey, did you see this one? Sincerely.
Oh, I wanted to say, give me some skin.
Give me some skin. So for everybody, I'm Jason. We went a little overtime this week, but that's okay. Sometimes we gonna talk. And
it was a good movie, man. It's one of the best. It's one of the greatest movies out there.
For Steve, I'm Jason. For Kaylin, I'm Jason.
For Jason and Steve, I'm Kellen.
For Kaylin and Jason, I'm also Steven.
I'm going to make you guys do it every single time. Good night.
Okay, bye.
I'm between the words. Read between the lines. Well, the lines won't be there when this comes up later.
These lines. Oh.
Bye.